Hello everyone, it's time once again for me to review something that is not Japanese, because the source material for this show is actually South Korean. It came from the work of a South Korean author. The show is a Crunchyroll original, which lets me know that Crunchyroll is doing the exact same thing that other streaming services like Netflix and Disney Plus are doing, which is that they use the money from their subscriber accounts to fund and develop new content for their streaming service. And the thing here is that if I'm being entirely truthful, ever since Naruto ended, and with the exception of One Piece, I've actually found it increasingly more difficult for me to get invested in anime and manga. And I feel like it's because as you get older, and you have like different life experiences, your tastes change in accordance with those life experiences. So you kind of seek out stuff that at least echoes or reflects a part of those life experiences or some of the lessons that you've learned. But then also, I've become more cynical. I'm not going to deny that, it's become harder for me to buy into things in general.
I can't. I've tried it and I failed.
Why does everyone expect it?
So I watched the first episode of this last week because even before then, people were sending me messages, Tower of God, Sawyer, Tower of God, oh my gosh, And so I was like, okay, I guess I'll give it a try. And I watched the first episode, and then after it ended, I did something that I rarely do, which is that I went to the source material. And at the risk of this sounding like a total cliche, I do have to say that this feels different. It feels smart in the same way that Hunter x Hunter feels smart. But then it also feels like you're discovering this pre-established world along with the main character's journey. Like the more I read from the webcomic, because that's what it is. It's not technically like a manga, it's like a webcomic in color that you can scroll down and read for free. It's on Webtoons if you want to read it. For those of you who haven't started already. As I kept reading, I noticed that this universe had rules that I was engaging with, because like they give you the rules and then you're like thinking about, okay, how are they going to solve this test, or what's going to be the resolution of this test, or what lesson is it that the characters have to take away from this task, right? So it was engaging and fun, but it was fun because it was smart.
There were two things that jumped out at me since I started watching. The first one is how artistically refined everything looks. Everything from the art to the animation looks pretty exquisite. If you look at the settings and the backgrounds, a lot of them seem like they were painted by hand. It reminded me a lot of like old school Disney movies that I grew up on, where they would paint the backgrounds on boards or canvases, and then they would later add the animation over them. And then the second thing that jumped out at me was how vague the origin story of the main character was. It's very simple. Like, it's just so simple. It's deprived of like a lot of detail. Like, we know that he's pretty much in love with this girl and that she wants to go up the tower because she wants to see the stars, and so he follows after her. So the journey starts off with a very basic premise, but as I kept reading, and especially when you learn how the tests are structured and also what the resolution is for each test, you kind of begin to learn that this is much more complex than you initially thought. At least that's how it was for me. Because each test has a lesson that you have to learn from, right? So in the beginning, for the main character, it's overcoming your fear of death. Like, are you willing to risk your life to go up the tower? But also a bit of luck is also in play here, because the Black March said that like she was essentially just helping him because he's a guy. So just how lucky is he that he happens to be a guy, and that Black March had a liking or took a liking to him. So it's a combination of several aspects, and that theme of luck actually gets explored further later on. And so from what I've read, given that the story does become more complex, I can only hope that Bam's origin gets explored further down the road as well. The whole idea of the tower actually reminded me a lot of Dante's Divine Comedy. I don't know if you've ever read it, but it's essentially about this guy called Dante who has to go through different levels of the afterlife. And so he starts off with hell, and hell is made out of several circles, and each circle kind of has like a sin assigned to it. So depending on what your biggest sin is, that's where you go. And so the lower you get, the worse it gets, like the worst kind of punishment there is. And so ultimately ultimately in the novel, Dante also ends up visiting heaven, and heaven is also made out of several levels, several spheres. And so it depends on what virtue you had in life. That's the sphere that you go to. But before you can get to heaven, before Dante can get to heaven, he has to go through purgatory. And purgatory is this climb upward that resembles a tower, and it has several levels. In each level, there's a sin that you have to atone for. So the task of each level depends on the sin. For example, to atone for pride, you have to carry a rock on your back as you make the climb because pride weighs you down. And then to atone for wrath, you have to make the climb through some very thick smoke because wrath, which stems from anger, blinds you from seeing things clearly. And so it goes on, and it varies depending on each sin, but the point of purgatory is to get to heaven clean, right? And so that's kind of what the different floors and tests within this tower reminded me of a little bit. And now, I could be totally wrong about this, but given that the premise of the show stems from something romantic, a guy chasing a girl up a tower, I kind of get the feeling that the series won't shy away from romance. Like, if nothing else, I definitely got some romantic vibes from Yuri and her reaction to Bam in the beginning. From her end, not his end, because right now he's kind of obsessed with Rachel. Because Yuri did try to help him by lending him her sword, and as we follow the story, we find out how important she actually is, given her title. And I'm mainly saying this because I suspect that maybe one of the points of the series could be to be able to let go of what you want, and that it's actually the climb what's most important. Like, something that I'm still not sure of is if Rachel felt the same way, like, why did she leave him? It kind of reminds me a bit of Hunter x Hunter in a way, where Gon finally meets his dad, and he tells him that it's important to cherish the journey, because at the end of the day, that's where you'll find the things that are more important than what you actually want.
The first episode of the show actually ends with a very clever cliffhanger in that it's kind of like this Hunger Games / Battle Royale situation where the contestants are placed on this open field and they're told that in order to advance to the next round, they have to take each other out.
But then the whole thing gets resolved pretty quickly in this episode, since the participants are forced to make teams of 3 with each other in order to advance. And so, having read ahead, I noticed that the pacing of episode 2 did seem a lot faster than episode 1. But as it turns out, like, both episodes actually ended up adapting 6 episodes of the webcomic, approximately. In this episode, episode 2, we get introduced to the companions of the main character, Rock and Kun. Rock is the dumb muscle type character of the group that is often used as comedic relief, whereas Kun actually reminds me a lot of Killua from Hunter x Hunter. I feel like Kun could be like a member of Killua's family, and everybody would just accept it. And so he actually says something in this episode that is foreshadowing for something that happens later on. Of course, there's also other teams around, which kind of gives this section of the story a sort of tuning exam kind of vibe. And I don't know why, but at this point in the webcomic, I kind of felt like I had spent more time with the characters for some reason. I don't know if it was because I was just taking my time reading it, but in the anime, it just feels like everything happens really fast in the first section of this episode, in the first half. Anyway, the characters that I immediately thought were the most interesting from the start were Hats, the samurai guy, Anak, the lizard girl, and then the guy in the sleeping bag who hasn't been properly introduced yet in the anime. Anyway, the cast advances to the next level where they're introduced to this universe's version of hockey or chakra or energy. In this case, it's called Shinsu, which translates into divine water. And the point here is that the further you go up the tower, the more intense it gets. Also, the ending decided to show a shot of Rachel there on the grass, and I'm not sure if that was intentionally supposed to be a spoiler or if that was just like an artistic thing that they decided to animate for the ending.
That's going to do it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this review. If you liked it, you know what to do. This season of Tower of God, or this section of the story of the webcomic, anime-wise, will have 13 episodes. So we're in for a 13-episode season, according to Anime News Network.
And like I said, after watching episode 2, I went back to the webcomic and I found that the anime is actually covering about 6 chapters of the webcomic per episode. And so the first season, season 1 of the webcomic, actually has a total of 78 chapters. So if you multiply the 13 episodes that we're supposed to get by 6, 13 times 6 gives you 78. And so essentially that means that the 13 episodes that we're getting of anime are going to be covering the first full season of this webcomic. So let me know if you feel the pacing is going to be an issue for you moving forward, given what I just said. Because I think like ultimately the content that is left for the anime to adapt is actually pretty solid. I mean, again, it's a very engaging story. But let me know what you feel about the pacing.
I'm going to keep reading the webcomic because it's kind of addicting. So yeah, wish me luck with that. Thanks again for watching. Let me know your thoughts down below. Catch you guys later. Take care. Stay safe. Bye.